Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you, and if you're returning, thanks so much for coming back. I'm excited to see you again. On my channel, we talk about true crime things on Tuesdays, and on Saturdays, we do like a conspiracy theory or strange history or paranormal, anything kind of that piques my interest, but nothing true crime. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can go ahead and click the little subscribe button down below, as well as the bell icon so you can be notified when I upload. Only if you want to though, no pressure. I do want to give a quick warning that some of the things that we talk about can be pretty heavy, especially today's video. It's going to talk, we're going to discuss some pretty heavy topics like essay and also abuse. So if that is something that you cannot handle, just go ahead and click off this video and I will catch you somewhere else. But your mental health is always going to be more important than any YouTube video ever will be. So with all of that being said, let's just go ahead and jump into today's video. So today's case is pretty tragic and also very shocking. I will leave the little twist at the end. But I'm really curious to see what you guys are going to think about this, because I know I was just left in awe at the very end. But today we're going to be talking about Stephen Freeman. Stephen was born on January 1st of 1995. He grew up in Griffin, Georgia. He did have another brother that he was very close to. He was also very close to his parents, Jennifer and Troy. Stephen was pretty much the all-American, just typical all-American boy. He liked to spend time with his family. He also had a very good group of friends, a lot of friends. He was very close to his friends, and he was just a really well-liked person. He had no problems making new friends, and he was just very well liked in social settings. Stephen was a very active person. He especially enjoyed being outside, doing things like hunting and fishing. He liked to camp. Just anything that included him being outside was something that he thoroughly enjoyed. Stephen was always smiling and happy. He was just a really happy person. He lived with very little stress, what his parents said. He just was one of those guys that let things roll off his shoulders. He was just a really laid back, happy person. But he, like I said, he was most happy when he was spending time outside. Stephen was dating a girl named Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine enjoyed the same things that Stephen did. She enjoyed being outside, hunting, camping, fishing, all of the things that Stephen enjoyed, so it really wasn't a surprise when they started dating in high school. They were high school sweethearts. Them both enjoying the outdoors really seemed to bring them closer together. Mary Catherine was born in 1994, and her parents described her as being a very happy and creative girl. She just enjoyed being outside just as much as Stephen did. She was just a really easygoing person as well, very creative, lively, happy. She would just happy. After Stephen and Mary Catherine graduated from high school, they decided to move in together into their own home, still in Griffin, Georgia. Stephen started working as a metal worker, and Mary Catherine worked part-time as a teacher assistant, and she also had another job at a sporting goods store where she sold guns. Stephen had a really tight-knit group of friends, and those friends included Chase Pruitt, Andrew McRee, and Thomas Skinner. Him and Thomas seemed to be especially close. Thomas actually worked with Mary Catherine at the same sporting goods store, so Thomas knew both Mary Catherine and Stephen, and he was closer to Stephen than he was to Mary Catherine, but all of the guys in this friend group really were concerned about who the other would date, because they wanted to make sure that everyone kind of got along. So at first it seemed like they were kind of skeptical of Mary Catherine, but as time went on, they realized just how happy Mary Catherine made Thomas, and so they accepted her into the friend group as well. They were happy for the both of them, and they were especially excited that the couple really enjoyed doing things together that involved the outdoors. They liked that Mary Catherine was just as excited about doing things outdoors as Thomas was, so it really seemed to be a good fit. Mary Catherine also got along really well with Stephen's family. Every Sunday, Stephen would have dinner with like basically all of his extended family, his mom and his grandparents, and Mary Catherine started coming to those family dinners, and she was welcomed into the family as well. The family loved that they were in a relationship together and that they were spending this time together. And Jennifer, Stephen's mother, actually thought of Mary Catherine as her own daughter. Since she didn't have a daughter of her own, she took her in as her daughter. All of the families were excited about this relationship, and everything seemed to be going very, very well. But things were not all that it seemed to be on the outside. Mary Catherine was very possessive in this relationship. Mary Catherine had to constantly know where Stephen was. She was just very possessive of Stephen and his time. And there are several instances of the police being called to Mary Catherine and Stephen's home. 2 of those times were for domestic disputes. One of those times included animals. So it didn't seem like things were not quite as easygoing as Mary Catherine and Stephen probably wanted others to think they were. By the summer of 2018, Stephen and Mary Catherine's relationship was off and on. It seemed like they would break up and get back together. It was pretty hot and cold. They were still living together, but the relationship wasn't as stable as people from the outside thought it was. On August 1st of 2018, Mary Catherine called 911 and she was hysterical. She was crying about how she had accidentally shot her boyfriend and how she needed EMS to come immediately. Now, you can find this 911 call online here on YouTube, and it is pretty disturbing. There are some people who believe that this 911 call sounds staged, but there's also people who believe that it sounds genuine and that Mary Catherine really does seem hysterical in the 911 call. When police arrived to the scene and EMS arrived to the scene, they did find Stephen with a gunshot wound right below his neck in his chest. He did still have a pulse, so he was rushed to the hospital, but he was pronounced dead a couple of minutes after he got there. There is police footage of Mary Catherine at the scene, and she does seem very hysterical, and she's leaning over Stephen's body saying, "I can't lose him, I can't lose him, please help him, please help him." She was very distraught, and she did have to physically be removed from the scene. But when police were looking at the scene, they also realized that this wasn't just they really thought that this was a homicide and not an accident like Mary Catherine had first claimed. So Mary Catherine was brought in for an interrogation, and at first she said that she was trying to hand Stephen the gun and it had accidentally gone off and shot him. Mary Catherine told police that their guns were typically not loaded in the house, so she had no clue that it was even loaded, and that she had accidentally discharged the gun, and it was a complete accident. But when police looked at the scene, they realized that there was food laying on the floor, and it was just very apparent that something had gone on this evening. There was food thrown on the floor. It just seemed like there had been something going on in this house, and it wasn't quite as calm as Mary Catherine wanted it to seem. So they started using a police tactic where they started basically screaming at her, and eventually they were able to get a confession from Mary Catherine. She told police that she had shot Stephen out of anger. So after this confession, police arrested Mary Catherine and charged her with a homicide. And when they went to go review this footage, it was corrupted. The audio in the video, or the confession video, was completely corrupted. You can hear bits and pieces, but they could not use it for evidence. So the confession that they had just got from Mary Catherine was completely useless. So since this confession was useless, police did have to find other evidence to help convict Mary Catherine of this murder. So obviously they're going to go and interview people that were closest to Stephen, and that included all of his friends. And literally all of Stephen's friends said that they believed that Mary Catherine had done this on purpose, that she had shot Stephen on purpose. They told investigators stories about the physical, mental, and verbal abuse that Stephen had endured while he was in a relationship with Mary Catherine. Some of Stephen's co-workers told investigators of times that they had been driving to a job site, and before they had even gotten to this job site, Mary Catherine had called Stephen over 30 times. When Stephen was out with his friends, Mary Catherine would call him so persistently that he would eventually have to block her number in order to be able to enjoy his time with his friends. She was very possessive of his time and had to know everything he was doing whenever he was doing it and whoever he was doing it with. Stephen's friends also discussed with investigators that they had seen Mary Catherine be physical with Stephen on multiple occasions. They said that she would slap him and punch him and just say awful things to him, but Stephen never retaliated physically with her. The only thing that they had ever seen was that Stephen had taken Mary Catherine's hand after she had hit him and put it down and said, "Don't hit me again." Thomas Skinner, Stephen's friend who had worked with Mary Catherine at the sporting goods shop, told investigators that in July of 2018, Stephen had actually decided he was going to leave Mary Catherine. Seeing that this was not a typical relationship where you can just end things with somebody, Stephen had to make a plan to get away from Mary Catherine, not just break up with her, but he had planned to move all of his things to the next town over and do this all while Mary Catherine was at work so that she couldn't harm him while he was trying to get away from her. Thomas told investigators that Stephen had planned on doing this on August 3rd of 2018. On top of all this, Thomas told investigators that he and Mary Catherine had worked at the sporting goods store, and both of them had to take gun safety courses in order to work there to make sure that they wouldn't accidentally discharge a firearm while they were in the store. So he told investigators that he and Mary Catherine had gone through plenty of gun safety courses, and she knew how to handle a gun properly. Mary Catherine also went around telling people, in fact, she was bragging to people about how well she was able to handle a gun. So Thomas really didn't buy the story that this gun had accidentally gone off while she was handing it to Stephen or while she had tossed it to Stephen, because she also changed her story and said that she had tossed it to Stephen instead of just handed it to him. But Thomas didn't buy this at all because he knew that Mary Catherine knew how to handle a gun properly, and this is just not something that would have happened to her. Police were also able to prove that the gun had been loaded that night. Mary Catherine had made Stephen a dinner that night. It was a London broil, which is a pretty greasy meal, and they were able to find grease on the side of the gun, proving that it had been loaded that night. So the timeline of kind of what investigators think had happened: the night before Stephen had been shot, he and Mary Catherine had gotten into a pretty vicious fight. Stephen had left the house and told his friend Thomas that he was running away from Satan. But by the next day, it seems Mary Catherine had kind of calmed down from the fight, and she decided to make the London broil, which was Stephen's favorite dinner, and was trying to kind of smooth things over and make things better. After the meal had been prepared, she started calling Stephen, asking when he was going to be home because she had made this dinner for him, and he wasn't answering. And she was so persistent in calling him, just calling him over and over and over again, and Stephen wasn't answering. Stephen was with Thomas, his friend, and they decided to go cruising for a little bit, and that's when Mary Catherine decided to go out and look for Stephen. She found Thomas and Stephen, and Thomas told investigators that she was tailgating him and pulling up really close to him at stoplights, and she would even pull up beside them and just scream at Stephen saying, "You need to come home," or "Why aren't you coming home?" And it was after this that Stephen finally kind of gave up and decided to go home and just deal with Mary Catherine on his own. So with all of this being said, Mary Catherine was charged with murder, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and also aggravated assault. She was offered a plea deal of life in prison with the possibility of parole, but she denied this and decided to go to trial, where she pled not guilty. Mary Catherine came up with the defense and said that she actually had to do this in self-defense, that she had to shoot Stephen Stephen in self-defense. She claimed that not only was Stephen emotionally and verbally abusive, but that he was also physically abusive and had been for years. She said that Stephen would often slap her and kick her and punch her, and that Stephen was very aggressive with her. But the awful thing is that she had a lot of text messages that kind of backed her up. Her defense team was able to come up with a slew of text messages that Stephen had sent Mary Catherine, and they were awful. He said some very terrible, awful things to her. But it's at this point that I want to talk about something called reactive abuse. And this is something that a lot of abuse victims will go through. And if you poke someone over and over and over again, eventually they're going to explode. And I think this is something that we don't talk about enough. And to me, this is just my own personal opinion, but it really seems to me like maybe Stephen was going through this. Maybe he had had so much from Mary Catherine's abuse that finally he just exploded and said these things out of anger because he was just so tired of the toxic relationship that he just exploded himself. But with Stephen not being here and not being able to defend himself, it's really hard to judge by these text messages and what Mary Catherine is saying. But either way, it seemed like the relationship was just extremely toxic. Jennifer, Stephen's mom, came out and said that she was absolutely shocked by these text messages and that she agreed that Stephen sent these messages out of anger, that this was not typical behavior for him, that he would not do this if there wasn't a reason. And so it kind of seems to me like Stephen just kind of exploded after enduring a lot of abuse from Mary Catherine. Mary Catherine did take the stand during her trial, and she would tell the jury about the abuse that she had endured with Stephen, saying that he had essayed her multiple times and that he even had a fetish for very aggressive relations, if you catch my drift, that he was into very aggressive things in their bedroom. Mary Catherine's sister also took the stand in defense of her sister, saying that she did see some of the abuse that had happened in their relationship and that she had seen Mary Catherine with bruises just a couple of weeks before the shooting happened. But on the other hand, Stephen's friends took the stand and told the jury all about the abuse that they had seen Mary Catherine inflict on Stephen. Mary Catherine also said that on the night of the shooting, she was actually the one that was breaking up with Stephen and he had attacked her. She was so afraid that she had taken the gun and pointed it at him and told Stephen to get the F out of her house. And that's when he lunged at her. And that's when she shot him. But investigators were able to prove that Stephen was shot from a seated position on the mattress. He was sitting down on the mattress, and when he was shot, he fell back. They were also able to find a text message on Stephen's phone to Mary Catherine saying that the last time you held a gun at me, or you pointed a gun at me, it actually scared me. And Mary Catherine tried to write this off as her wanting to hurt herself. And this isn't exactly a false claim. Mary Catherine had made or had threatened multiple times to harm herself. And Stephen's friends and family believe that this is why he stayed as long as he did, because he was afraid that Mary Catherine would actually hurt herself if Stephen did leave. Another really strange thing is that Mary Catherine was watching some very violent adult content the day or just prior to the shooting happening. And she was watching this while she was babysitting some kids. It's just strange, and I think it is important to her mindset before all of this happened. But eventually, the trial came to an end, and the jury was sent to deliberate, and the first 5 minutes of their deliberation, they did take a vote to see kind of where they stood on her verdict, and 10 people voted guilty, while 2 people voted not guilty. They would deliberate for a short time, and when they came back, they found Mary Catherine not guilty on all counts, which is strange to me. I don't quite understand why they got to this verdict, but the jury did say that they thought that they were going to ruin a family's life either way. Now, we don't know exactly what was going on in this relationship. It was toxic for sure, and both of them probably should have just walked away so that they could both have a happy and healthy life away from each other. But I do find it strange that it was proven that Stephen was sitting down when he was shot, and he was not lunging at her. It didn't seem like there was any room for a self-defense claim here. And yet Mary Catherine is completely free. She moved to another state, and she's just living her life while Stephen's family and his friends get to live without him. I don't agree with this verdict whatsoever. I think that they should have found her guilty of something at least, but she is free to go and free to live her life. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to this case. I really am curious to know your thoughts, so if you want to, just go ahead and leave them down in the comments below, and we can have a conversation down there. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you today. Here's just another reminder that if you want to, you can hit the subscribe button down below and the little bell icon so you can be notified when I upload. But that's all I have for you today. I am sending you so much love, and I hope this finds you so well. Again, let me know your thoughts. I'm just dying to know what you're thinking. And yeah, I will see you next week. Bye.